Okay.
Long-term strategic planning.
You have to kind of take these things and break them out into Lego blocks versus trying to put the entire house together at the same time.
What's up, gang? Welcome back to Beyond the Pump, where we break down the business of fitness and nutrition. And today we're going to actually talk about, I think it's going to be like a combo episode, a little bit about the programmatic side of nutrition and fitness, the actual getting somebody a result, but also the business side of things. And we're going to be breaking down periodization, long-term strategic planning, and how do we just think about some of those things on both sides of the business, the delivery, the business itself, and ultimately achieving the outcomes that you want, but also you want your clients to get. So, welcome back, Andrew. Happy, today's Thursday. Happy Thursday, Andrew. How are you today, man?
Happy Thursday. Yeah, life is lifing for sure. It's a lot to, guys, it's funny because when we think about the nature of most people struggle to build a business. And for whatever reason, I don't know how this happens. If you ever wanted a lead generation system, you just co-locate with Steve because he literally just trips into clients and his relationship building skills are bar none. So that's definitely pretty cool to watch
I got a text
unfold.
last night, by the way, about a potential other one.
God damn it. I love that.
Just letting you know.
See, that's what I'm talking about. But in that vein, it's we're over halfway with our nutrition certification offering that has been really cool to get to test in person. So I'm definitely excited to get to launch that here in the next couple weeks. It's just such a unique experience when you get to teach it, and you get to see how people are reacting. And they just had a midterm exam actually, which is really funny. So a lot of good stuff on the horizon. Yeah, but anyway, so that's pretty much the life right now. How about you?
I'm just working on getting this sty thing to kind of completely go away. We are way better than 3 weeks ago when this thing was really developing. You saw me on like day 2 of getting antibiotics in and everything like that. I was still pretty jacked up. But I'm 90% better, just the tail end. So I was at the doctor this morning, but outside of that, I am sore. I changed up my workouts, and it's been a while since I've been like sore. Like, that sore where you're like, man, I don't want to have to go up those stairs, or more importantly, down the stairs or something. I need to sit down right now. Anybody got a cane, a walker for me? But it actually feels good. You'd be proud of me. I didn't go work out this morning. And I abstained from jujitsu last night as well. Figured my body needed some rest. So yeah, you'd be proud.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's one of those things where, knowing when to pull back has definitely been an interesting coaching point with you over the last couple of years. And so to hear that you're off and kind of learning how to pull back is I think it's a really cool experience when you just feel like, here you go. You got it. You're not going to kill yourself. But yeah, so that's definitely amazing to hear.
Well, it's interesting, and I guess maybe parlaying here into our conversation around periodization. I've been self-programming and doing these things wholeheartedly on my own, just focusing on my stuff and trusting in my ability here. I'm now in like my third phase of moving through stuff. And first round of let's gain some muscle went really, really well. The round of let's lose some fat and retain muscle, I would say went okay. Went well. There was more travel during that time, so we know when I'm inconsistent, it's just harder. The goal was achieved. It's just like I feel like when I'm in that let me gain muscle phase, things happen more quickly. And I had this big realization that like my body functions way better when I'm working out consistently and I'm eating well and well fed and all of these things. And it's like, even when I'm like, hey, I got to try to cut, what I've kind of started to realize is I probably need to find a way to get my maintenance calories up to like 3,000 calories or so. So how do I get to there? Maybe 2,800, somewhere in that range and whatnot. So that way my cut calories is more like 2,400, 2,500 versus like
Mm-hmm.
being cut calories like 1,800, 2,000, because now all of a sudden it's like my body just seems to be like, all right, cool, we're just going to shut down and not go. And I'm
Yeah.
it's something I'm sure you've told me something about this before, but I it was just this new, like, in order for me to be optimal, my calories actually just overarching need to be way higher, um, all
Mm-hmm.
around. Like I need to. It's
Yep.
funny, when I first started coaching with you, what was I eating, like 1,700 calories a day? Now I feel like I'm
No, it's like 14.
1,400. Like
It's like
I'm
1400.
emaciated and
Yeah.
gonna die if that happens. But
Dude, there's no way.
so
Yeah.
anyways, it's the periodization of like looking at these phases and try to gain some muscle and lose some fat and gain some muscle and do
Mm-hmm.
this, but like overarching, keep going that upward trajectory has been a
Mm-hmm.
fun game for me to look at. But there's a lot of components. I'm like, man, I want to look as good as I possibly can look right now in the summer, but my body's also telling me it's time to gain some weight. It's like, man, what do I do? And I'm like, oh, I got a clean bulk. I got a not dirty bulk. So like no 800 calorie cookies to hit my calorie goals. Um, so then you got,
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned, the 800 calories because they're actually, and it depends on the goal, because there's always trade-offs that have to happen. If you want to be lean, then the trade-off is you're going to be constantly satiated from a hunger perspective. And I think when people go in, I'm like, I'm going to lose 20 pounds and not prepared for these things, whether it's a skill thing or a psychology thing or some other component that's just poor planning or isn't considered. Those are the questions that we want to start to think about as coaches. And like I can't remember where I heard this, but it's something that has been a saying for probably like close to almost 20 years now. And that um, what you use, you must replace, and so everything is on borrowed time, so to speak. So if you want to toss all your attention into losing, body fat, then there's going to be a recomposition, or there's going to be an effect on the back end that your body's probably going to try to, some people call it a set point. Um, some people call it a settling point. And these are things that basically your body just kind of wants to be where it wants to be, and, kind of making your peace with that. But figuring out if you want to look better, feel better, or do better, like performance wise, that's a really important, I guess, paradigm to look at. Do you need to do these things that people are constantly hearing about, which is bulk, cut, or kind of maintain? And we'd like to propose that there's something else. And I heard Alan Aragon say this one, but there's something called gaintaining, which is where you more or less eat your maintenance calories, or what you need to stay exactly where you are, not gain weight, not lose weight, and then you just train harder. And that's definitely the perspective that I appreciate most these days. If I were to sum this entire episode and paradigm or way of thinking about long-term planning, which is all periodization is. Some people will say, hey, I invented nutritional periodization. I just kind of laugh and I'm like, that's been around for like decades, buddy. And that's what happens when you have people that just don't read the research and they say that sodium bicarbonate's a dumb thing and the white papers don't support it, and you're like, wow, do you read, bro? So just be careful what you hear on social media, and that is directed at somebody, yes. But at the same time, you just have to have the big picture in mind, which is all periodization is like, how do you take current state, back it into eventual state, and how do you make sure that you're not doing things that are conflicting, which doing cardiovascular training and strenuous strength training in the same session is actually contraindicated, meaning like you're not going to have great adaptations either way. It kind of, you're just creating this conflict of interest from a resources perspective. So that's more or less my general take on nutritional periodization. It's important long-term planning. You have to kind of take these things and break them out into Lego blocks versus trying to put the entire house together at the same time, which you can't put a roof on if there's no walls up, if there's no framing, if there's no foundation. And that's why, the building process is, for all intents and purposes, just strategic planning.
yeah, yeah. It's a fun, it's a fun game. And I look around me in the gym and I'm like, all right, everybody's clearly in cut season right now. Makes sense. Summertime, look good, all those components. The thing I'm wrestling with is like, all right, my body's telling me to do a thing, but seasonality wise, brain, emotions are telling me I want to go do a different thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, oh, what am I going to do? Well, the crazy thing was during my last bulk, I actually lost more poundage of fat and body fat percentage than I have during any cut phase that I've done. And I'm like, wait a minute.
Mhm.
If I go and I do it right and I focus and I get my macros dialed in and I'm hitting, I mean, let's say 96, 97% or better of where I should be, measuring 7 days a week, abnormal for
Mhm.
Steve, all these things. And on the other side of that, you lose fat and, like, again, pounds of fat volume, but also percentage of body fat. I'm like, well, I
Mhm.
can bulk and lean out at the same time. That's weird. Um, so it was again, and it took a
Yeah.
lot of time of learning. It took a lot of time of this stuff, which, don't get me wrong, I'm sure there's going to be a point in
Mhm.
time where I'm bulking and it's like, are you going to gain some, fat? Because if I if I wanted to bulk harder and get more muscle, I probably could. Like my buddy
Mhm.
Dave,
Mhm.
he's got massive thighs, and all he does is do 5x5 squats. I'm just gonna throw that out there. Love Dave, squats a lot. He wonders why he's
Mhm.
got bursitis in his hip, and I have no idea why. I'm not sure, but anyways, um, it's one of those things where he swears, he's like, Steve, you look at a dumbbell and your biceps get bigger, and I'm like, no, that's just when I eat enough protein, they just naturally get bigger. It's a cool weird thing that happens. And him and I very much have different body types for sure, but learning what your body does and how it adapts and whatnot has been a fun journey and whatnot.
Mhm.
So
Yeah. Well, I think that's a really big value of coaching is that it helps people understand what to pay attention to and what's noise and what's not, because not everyone needs the same plan. And so I think more importantly is that if there's enough patience in the system and there's enough data collection and refinement, like that's really what creates a lot of autonomy on the client side of the house, is that now they know what to pay attention to because you've side by side them for so long that they're like, okay, well, I feel this way. I know I probably need to make these changes. And that's really the pinnacle of coaching. And like, once you have someone doing that, your job is done. And if they want to keep you around, that's cool. If they don't want to keep you around, then like, that's where they leave you a gap to then pull someone else in at a higher price point. And that's kind of where we talk about business periodization. That's probably the first thing that you're trying to do is get people self-sufficient and try to cut people loose after you achieve their goals a couple times. And you probably have a good system if you've done that a couple times.
yeah,
And if you're constantly failing that, then that's an invitation for you to consider, like, where are you dropping these people off? I was having a conversation with one of my previous graduates probably like 2-3 weeks ago, and she was like, hey, we were talking about lifetime value and how much she's getting per client because she had a certain revenue goal. And I was like, all right, cool. Like, how long are you keeping your clients? And the average was like 5-ish months. Her program was 6 months long, so they weren't finishing her program. And I'm like, well, where are they dropping off? She had no idea. Most coaches don't. And so going through that, because she was using an app called Coach Catalyst. I'm not the biggest proponent, although I see that it has some function if that's your jam. But she went through and we had her go through and peel out every single person's compliance week over week over week for the duration that they were with her. It was painstaking. And I kind of laugh because I'm like, I don't envy that. And she found out that, like, generally speaking, most people dropped off at months 4, 6, and 7. You're like, okay, those are the major drop off points. Like, why is that? Now you got to go through and look at the weeks leading up to that. And that's, when we talk about tying this back into long term planning, there just wasn't a great long-term plan in place. And it was really just repeating the same 12-week program, which is why in the second go around, people were dropping off because they didn't see the value. And, it was just kind of this repetitive conversation. So I think having a functional, like, and when I say functional, like a way that you can kind of frame out what does a long-term plan for the duration of your coaching contract look like. And if your coaching contract's like less than 12 years, I think you put yourself under a lot of pressure um, to deliver results that, I mean, the first 1 to 3 months is just fact finding. You have no idea how they're going to respond. You have no idea what's going to happen from an outcome perspective. Maybe you just crush them. Maybe they freak out. Maybe their life is crazy and doesn't allow them to do the plan. And so that's where I say it's like, unfortunately, a longer period of time that just isn't accounted for because coaches will give them everything right up front, right out of the gate, and it just crushes people's attention and bandwidth. That leaves them pretty dispirited.
yeah, yeah. I mean, you mentioned business planning, right, and what that looks like. So a lot of coaches jump in and they start a business, and it's like, oh, I'm just going to go and do this thing because I'm passionate about the thing, and you know, I can maybe make some money. And I heard this one guy was a millionaire because of it. It's awesome. And I can quit my 9 to 5 because that guru promised that I could do that thing. And those things are very real. And I would say they are more prominent than that random person who won the lottery and things like that. It is something that happens better than
Mm-hmm.
1% of the time, or sub 1% of the
Yeah.
time. But what happens is we never graduate, or we rarely graduate from that phase of I'm just going to do this as a hobby I get paid for, to actually running a business and where's it going to go, right? You have seasons, we always
Mm-hmm.
talk about it, and like, oh, grind your face off mode versus like, oh, kind of chill out mode and all these things. Right now I'm definitely in a grind my face off mode, but I'm enjoying the grind. It's fun. But on the other side of that, I know I need the season where I'm not doing that. And that definitely comes in July-ish for me,
Mm-hmm.
usually in early August. So there's
Yeah.
those components where I just want to get stuff done. But understanding what the long-term goal is, not only just like this month and next month, but a year from now,
Mm-hmm.
is important. Now, so many people get stuck
Mm-hmm.
on this, like, what am I going to do from a year? I don't know, a year from now, like all the things, and 3 years and 5 years and all that stuff. I don't actually love the 3 and 5 year plans. I think that there should be some semblance of like, hey, what am I working towards? And it's probably beyond my 1 year goal. But chances are
Mm-hmm.
in business, and I'll relate it to golf, which if you know me, you know I am a stud at golf. Like dad jokes while golfing, I got that on lock. But
Check his socials for it.
we have the golf ball, you have the club head, and you hit it, and if you hit it
Mm-hmm.
perfectly, it goes where you want it to go. 200-300 yards straight, wherever the case may be. If it's me, somewhere around 600 yards straight, perfect, no problem. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but what happens is if you hit that golf ball a little bit off with the golf head, and it's only off by you by, let's say, 10 degrees, which isn't a lot, but after 100 yards, that's a lot. And that's going to relate to literally like 40, 50, 60 feet away from where you wanted it to be, which is that's a decent distance. Same thing in
Mm-hmm.
business. 1 year, we can say, hey, yeah, we want this thing to happen. There's
Mm-hmm.
internal forces that are your business, external forces, our economy, the world, things like that. I'm willing to bet that a majority, like 90-95% of businesses don't actually obtain exactly what they said they wanted to obtain in 1 year. And when I say exactly, I mean sometimes you probably overshoot and are better, sometimes you undershoot and you're worse, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just hard to predict what's going to happen. But we need to have a general sense of where we're going and why we're doing it. So you start your business,
Mm-hmm.
you're doing it as a hobby that you can get paid for, hopefully elevating your life. At some point in time, you need to turn into a real business. You need to
Mm-hmm.
systematize things. Andrew's joking that I trip into clients. And in my like operations, growth, revenue coaching business, that Andrew and I get to work with each other and we have some fun with clients and everything. And it's a fun world to be in. I literally do no advertising. I just meet people and then I get referrals. And it's
Mm-hmm.
been 2 years of just clients. Like, and I've not tried. I just put myself in a room to meet people. So I
Mm-hmm.
literally 2 weeks ago, hey, new client, last client, last night, get a text, hey, might have a new client. I'm like, maybe not. Probably going to say no, but I'll have a conversation because you never know. And
You never know.
but for me, and I was like, all right, I need to make the decision on, am I going to make the business that we're doing this coaching in scalable, or am I going to keep it as is? Both of which are okay answers. So many people are like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, if I don't grow it to this big number, then it's not a great business. Like, no, that's false. Like, it's serving what you want it to serve is the right thing. So for me, I struggle with
Mm-hmm.
this. Do I want all these systems and infrastructure and scalability and everything? Because I'm not trying to grow this coaching business to be a multi-million-dollar empire. That's not the dream. That's not the vision. But maybe
Mm-hmm.
I can scale certain components and I can add 2 or 3 more clients, which, sure, fine. I always say last client. At some point in time, I have to stick to that. But it's about
Yeah.
knowing what you want and building towards that. Periodization
Yeah.
on the business side.
Yeah. I think having the end in mind is a super important place to start. And fortunately, that's what periodization is intended on doing, is backing people into that. And when I say backing, it's kind of like one of the Sean Covey's 7 highly effective habits, where
7 Habits
you
of
kind
Highly
of,
Effective People.
that one. Yeah, you get it. Um, and you think about where it is you're trying to go, and then you kind of backwards plan from there. And that was a huge military planning process. And, if there's a prominent author, if there is, an entire military organization that's very well funded, and that's kind of the planning process that they'll take, it's probably something that we can hearken to. And um, it's a little bit easier when you have performance oriented goals because there's a definitive deadline, and ready or not, it's going to show up, which is why it's, sometimes you see athletes going into their competitive season and they're like injured, which is like, that's the worst situation you can have, because you try to do too much. And now you have in this entire period of performance where you're just sucking ass because you didn't prepare properly, because you tried to do everything at the same time and you made no progress. But yeah, so when we talk about the big picture of like what is periodization, I think we really kind of talked about, and we've given some nice nuggets at this point. Generally speaking, there's a preparatory phase, right, where you're preparing to actually do the thing that you're trying to do. And then prior to that, there's a skill building phase where now you're trying to acquire different skills and attributes that you're going to need to make more specific during the preparatory phase. And then obviously you have your performance phase, which is basically where this is the thing that you were more or less hiring someone to do, whether it's your competitive, your performance phase might be getting ready for the beach. Okay, so then summer is like the length of time that you probably want to be ready for the beach in case you have a trip coming up or anything like that. And so how do you prepare for that? Okay, well, then you back that up. If I got to go to the beach May 28th, all right, let me back up a little bit. What am I doing prior to that? How long is that going to take for me to acquire these things and to put the skills and attributes that I've worked on during the season prior to that? How do I start to take those things and put them in there? And so when I say preparatory phase for the performance phase, beach is the performance phase. Preparatory phase, for example, would be, okay, now I know how to diet. I know how to lift weights. I know how to actually execute a training plan effectively. That would be, now let's put those into effectively what would look like the winning formula. If you back that up into some of like the skill building phase, now this is where you might start to introduce a diet. What are macros? Like a lot of those like knowledge components that you do frankly have to understand to some degree in order to execute the plan at a high level. This is where people will go and buy plans. I'm like, yeah. Like I just need the plan, and that's their preparatory phase. And they buy the plan, but it's templated and they have no self-awareness to self-regulate. Like, I should do this. I don't feel well. I'm using these pieces of equipment when I should be using these pieces of equipment. Does that matter? Does it not matter? How much of the plan do I have to do before I actually see that? And that's where buying templates is a little bit of a trade-off, because that's someone else's preparatory phase for a different, performance related outcome on the back end. And so you need to figure out, well, in order to do the preparatory stuff, what do you need to learn how to do in order to execute the actual necessary work at a high level? And that's what we're seeing right now, is that people are going into these plans in phase 2, and they're just executing, but they have no idea how to refine. And that's why we say, like, we have the CARE model: collect, assess, refine, and execute. And when you think about like the refinement, people literally just go from, they don't collect anything, they don't assess, they don't refine, and they just go out and execute. And they're wondering why they're beating their head up against the wall, because they didn't take the time to understand, like, okay, I need to understand how to barbell deadlift. I need to understand how to use selectorized machines. I need to understand, the purpose of tissue work or self-care, and like how to sleep better, and all the intangible things that go into making sure that the work that you are doing is effective. Because frankly, if you're not sleeping, at least 7 hours a night, you're stepping over dollars to pick up pennies. And so how do you then split that off? How do you manage your work environment? Like, those are things that you would work in the skill building phase to make sure that when you are actually like looking for an outcome, you're actually equipped to manage that process. So, and then on the back end, you kind of have your refinement phase after your performance, which is really just like you kind of reassess, chill out a little bit, and just have some downtime. So skill building phase, really important. Preparatory phase, where you take all the skills, you put them into a meaningful framework. And then you have your obviously performance or your execution phase, where now you're out there and like, these are where you're making continuous, smaller, more frequent refinements to tweak that, exactly what you're talking about with the club face and the golf swing. There's a rule called the 1 in 100 rule, where for nautical navigation, if you're taking a ship and you're trying to go from Cape Town, South Africa up to New York, for every 1 degree of travel you're off, you're going to be off a fair amount of travel. You'll end up in like Chesapeake Bay if you're off 1 degree across that long distance. And, you know, honestly, I don't know who wants to be in Virginia, because I hear people suck live in Virginia. So, you know, that's kind of the framework that I'd offer people is build the skill, put the skills into a cohesive plan that's best fit for that person. If you want to be a high value coach, help that person execute and refine the plan during the period that they actually care about. And then on the back end, how do you kind of reassess and refine everything else, and kind of basically create some rest and relaxation? And that's the 4-step process that I would say matters most. And you can apply that with fitness. You can apply that with nutrition. And frankly, if you are a great health coach, which are people that integrate both, you're going to make sure that these things match each other. If you're trying to do a caloric deficit and build muscle at the same time because you're doing a hypertrophy plan, I'm like, you know what the fuck you're doing. They're literally at odds. So that's my paradigm on that. What's yours for how you approach your business building stuff?
I mean, I would say it's pretty much the same. You have an outcome that you want to achieve, and you need to understand that. You have seasons in business where you need to go and grind and do the thing, and then you want to not grind and do certain things, but your focus is going to effectively be kind of moving. Um, you need to acquire the set of skills to be able to go out and do the thing you want to do, and you have to just execute along the way.
Mm-hmm.
So I would honestly say, like, skill acquisition, knowing what I'm doing, putting it all together, executing a process in order to get to what's going to ultimately be kind of that, call it performance season of like, okay, I've reached there. Let me keep doing my thing now in my maintenance level.
Mm-hmm.
And then while you're doing that, something is slipping somewhere, somehow, usually. So you're going to have to really, collect that data, assess it, refine it, and go back and just, all right, cool. What's my next phase going to look like, and how am I going to do that thing?
Mm-hmm.
Oftentimes we start a business, we get a couple of clients, and we start delivering service. We forget about getting clients. And then all of a sudden we have 2 clients that leave because of some reason, and we're like, crap, I have no clients. And then you're like, all right, let me go get clients. And then you have 5 more clients that leave because you stopped worrying about service delivery and you were trying to get clients. So it's just these distractions happen, and this kind of
Mm-hmm.
whittling away of some of the things that you have happens because we haven't proven that system, that model, that foundational scalable system to be in existence and kind of running on autopilot per se. So
Mm-hmm.
honestly, going to be pretty
Yeah.
similar.
Yeah. I mean, and that's, you mentioned autopilot, and I think that really is the ultimate goal of a coach, is to help someone understand that process in enough cycles that they're like, okay, cool, these are things I'm looking for. And that's where I think the value of a coach is just helping with the feedback and the debriefing. The more immediately we can drive feedback as a function of behavior sets, the faster people will really start to pay attention. Like, if you feel hungover after drinking, most people understand, like, I don't like that. And you're like, yeah, you want to keep doing that? And they're like, well, I guess, And so they'll do it until this is when you hit your 30s, and people's social habits generally change a little bit. They're like, I don't want to go to the bar much. Like, I'd rather just hang out and have a couple of drinks. By the time you're 40, now it's like, I'd rather maybe have like a drink once a week, because that's what helps me feel better. And so there's this learning effect that we're constantly getting feedback from. And we want to make sure that we're not changing things all willy-nilly, because let's say like you have a shitty workout week, and like, your nutrition's a little bit off, and it's because you're going through a breakup, or like your boss is stressing you out, or whatever it is. That would be an instance where you don't jack with the plan. You just let it stay, and you give someone else another week to try it out. But that's where, when we talk about the skill building phase, there's something called behavioral adoption lag. And that's where, you have to take some time to do the thing consistently before you change it and expect a different outcome. So people will take the workout plan. They're like, my biceps didn't grow this week. I'm going to go off plan, and I'm going to change the plan. And we see this all the time. It's basically training plan ADHD, because they're doing something, they don't see the immediate gratification as a result. And so now they're like, oh, it must not be working. Let me go ahead and shiny object syndrome into some other plan, coach, or process. And that process continuously happens, leaving someone with no deep grooves of, this is the general track that I need to go in that's best for me, because I tried something for all of 10 days and it didn't work.
Yeah.
So those are just some cautionary tales for people that are considering, like, well, how do I know when I need to do this? How do I know? Just hire a coach, honestly. Hire someone that, when you ask them about their philosophy, how do they coach? What is their general outcome? Well, my outcome is to get you the goal. If they say that, I would actually consider them a mid-tier coach. If they can get you to do that, that's great. A low skill coach would be someone that's more or less, when you start talking to them, like, yeah, it's going to be amazing. And they're going to try to sell you on the process. And they're going to say, how hard it is or how much fun it is. And you're like, well, it's still work at the end of the day. Like, I don't really care about the work. I just want the outcome. And this is where you'll find an advanced or an expert level coach is like, all right, what do you want? These are the things you probably can't expect. Is that something you're willing to do? And it's more conversational, but it's still very matter of fact of like, you want to lose weight, you got to be in a calorie deficit. That's just physics. Versus someone's like, well, you don't need to cut out your alcohol, or you don't need to give up your morning donuts, or like, you're like, I mean, there might be a time for that. So just some cautionary contraindications for people that are like, well, how do I know what's what? And how do I know who's actually good? Is they'll tell you what they believe and they'll tell you what they don't believe and why. And they'll let you make an informed choice on whether you want to engage with services on that individual level or not.
Sounds good.
Anything from you and as it relates to what to look for?
No, I mean, the only thing I'll say on the business side is, in, again, similar vein, recently with this client that we're onboarding, they asked me to speak with their CFO, had a conversation with him, and it was just this big, long conversation around, you must make sure that we're focusing on our close percentage and our sales and our close percentage and our sales and our close percentage and our sales. When fundamentally the issue in this business is from an operation standpoint, their team and their systems, their tech is at capacity. So like, I can focus on sales and acquisition all day long, but if we don't fix the capacity issue, we can never grow. And he was just so dead set on that thing. And I sent an email back the next day. I kind of thought through this and I was like, hey, I'm just going to be brutally honest. I'm doing my audit. We're going to come back. I believe these are our issues. Don't get me wrong. I don't think we should be sacrificing a close percentage or sales or marketing or acquisition in general. But if we don't fix this underlying foundational problem, we're never going to actually achieve the outcome that you told me you wanted to achieve. And on the other side of that conversation, I was like, all right, cool. Makes sense. Let's talk to this one last guy and then we'll get going from there. And it was just a real conversation around, here's what I'm seeing based upon the 40-minute conversation we had around your large business. I don't know all the details for sure. It's going to take some time, but here's where I'm at. So similar vein.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's really important for people to understand too, because as we talk about and harp on the importance of periodization and long-term strategic planning of like, how do you know which chess pieces to move when? And hopefully it's not just like one at a time reactive, because that's super stressful. It's like, I need to move here, so they move there. And then you kind of just have to figure out the dance of what that looks like. And sometimes it is a generally reactive process if you have no framework and you have no understanding of what that is. And that's again, like, I think that leads a lot of people to just burnout because they're like, well, I don't know what to do. And they get overwhelmed and they're like, why bother at all? So all that to say is, for people that are worried about periodization, either you're a coach or you've been doing your own fitness stuff for quite some time, and this is a relevant conversation for you. If you haven't been doing any kind of consistent exercise or nutrition or any kind of interventions that are related to your health, you don't need nutrition. You don't need periodization. You need execution to collect some baseline information on what you like, what you don't like, how it feels. Are you moving in the right direction? And that's where you'll start to create a very crude, rudimentary plan that like, all right, well, I feel best when I work out 3 times a week. I'm injured when I'm doing it 5 times a week. Like Andrew was doing, he was training, 12 times a week, at 12 training sessions a week. And he was constantly injured. His back was bugging him all the time. His shoulder would pop out. And like, as I've settled in over the years, I learned that it's not ideal, but it did take me some coaching and a lot of, please don't take 18 years of trial and error, because that's not fun for anyone. But generally speaking, if you're new to this, get going, take some notes. If you've been doing this for a while, we offered you the framework, skill building, preparatory phase where you integrate all that stuff and then you execute kind of on the back end and take some time to look at how it went and change it as you go. I think you'll be set up for success for the long term. And, there's different models for that. Maybe we'll talk about that in a future episode, but you got to do a little bit more every time once you're consistent. And I think that's the winning formula. So
thank you for listening to Beyond the Pump, hanging out with us today. Like this episode if we got some value out of it. Subscribe to the channel so you can hear the next ones, and throw a comment down below if there's anything you want us to talk about. Until next time, gang, thanks for joining.